The sound of metal grinding against metal cut through the quiet morning like a warning from fate itself. Armin Qureshi tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his heart sinking as he watched the luxury sedan ahead of him shudder violently before rolling to a helpless stop on the side of the road. He didn't know why, but something about that moment felt like the beginning of a storm he wasn't ready for. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because stories like this remind us how even the smallest acts can change lives forever. Armin hesitated. He was already late. His son, Zion, had barely finished breakfast when Armin rushed out, promising he'd make it back early tonight. It wasn't just another day, it was important. A blind date arranged by his well-meaning coworker, his first attempt in years to step out of the shadow of grief that had shaped his life ever since his wife passed away. Everything in him said to keep driving, to not get involved, to not risk being late again for something that might finally bring a little light into his life. But then he saw her. Standing beside the car was a woman, her expression tight with frustration but her posture unbroken. She looked composed, yet there was something in her eyes, something tired, something human, that made Armin's chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. Without thinking, he pulled over. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road as Armin stepped out, rolling up his sleeves with the quiet determination of someone who had spent years fixing things because no one else would. He approached the car and quickly assessed the problem. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to leave anyone stranded. He didn't ask too many questions, and she didn't offer many answers. There was a silent understanding between them, a fragile bridge built on necessity rather than words. As he worked under the hood, grease staining his hands, Armin felt a strange calm wash over him. This was something he understood, problems that had solutions, things that could be repaired with patience and effort. Unlike the chaos of his personal life, this was simple. The woman watched him quietly. Her phone buzzed several times, but she ignored it. The world seemed to pause around them, as if time itself had slowed to witness this small act of kindness. When the engine finally came back to life, the relief on her face was immediate but restrained. She thanked him, her voice soft yet firm, and offered to pay him for his trouble. Armin shook his head with a faint smile. He didn't help people for money. He never had. As he walked back to his car, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. For him, it was just another moment in a life full of quiet sacrifices. He had no idea that the universe had just rewritten his entire future. The rest of the day didn't go as planned. Armin arrived late to work, earning a cold glance from his manager. The blind date was cancelled at the last minute, leaving him with a hollow sense of disappointment he didn't want to admit. By the time he picked up Zion from school, exhaustion had settled deep into his bones. That night, as he tucked his son into bed, Zion asked a simple question that lingered long after the room went quiet. Why do you always help strangers, Baba, even when it makes things harder for you? Armin didn't have a perfect answer. He simply said that sometimes, helping someone else was the only way to remind yourself that you're still human. The next morning brought something unexpected. The office buzzed with tension as rumors spread about the arrival of a new CEO. Whispers of strict policies, high expectations, and ruthless decisions filled the air. Armin felt a knot form in his stomach. He had seen this before, leaders who cared more about numbers than people, who saw employees as replaceable parts rather than human beings. When the announcement finally came, the room fell silent. And then she walked in. The same woman from the roadside. Armin's breath caught in his throat as recognition hit him like a tidal wave. The woman he had helped without a second thought was now standing at the front of the room, commanding attention with a quiet authority that was impossible to ignore. Her name echoed through the space, but Armin barely heard it. All he could think about was the cruel irony of it all. She was the CEO he had been dreading. Panic flickered through him. Had he said something wrong? Had he offended her somehow? Would she remember him? Would his act of kindness become irrelevant in the face of corporate hierarchy? Days passed, and the tension only grew. The new CEO was everything people had feared, demanding, precise, and unyielding. Changes swept through the company like a storm, leaving many struggling to keep up. Armin worked harder than ever, trying to balance his responsibilities at work with his duties as a father. But then, one afternoon, everything changed. He was called into her office. The walk down the hallway felt endless, each step heavier than the last. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios, his heart pounding against his chest. When he finally stood before her desk, he forced himself to remain calm, even as anxiety threatened to consume him. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. There was no anger in her eyes. No cold detachment. Instead, there was something unexpected, recognition, and something deeper that Armin couldn't quite place. She remembered him. Not as an employee. Not as a name on a file. But as the man who had stopped his car on a quiet morning to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. In that moment, the walls she had built around herself began to crack. She spoke of that morning, of how she had been on her way to an important meeting, already burdened by the weight of her position and the loneliness that came with it. She admitted that his simple act of kindness had stayed with her, reminding her of something she had almost forgotten, that beneath titles and responsibilities, people still needed compassion. For Armin, the conversation was surreal. He had never imagined that such a small moment could carry so much significance. Slowly, the dynamic between them began to shift. She started to see the company differently, not just as a machine to be optimized but as a community of individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. Armin, in turn, found himself stepping out of his comfort zone, offering ideas and insights he had once kept to himself. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they were real. The office became a place where people felt seen, where effort was recognized, and where kindness was no longer considered a weakness. And for Armin, something else began to change too. The weight he had carried for so long, the loneliness, the grief, the quiet exhaustion, began to feel a little lighter. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Armin stood outside the office building, watching as life moved around him. He thought about that morning, about the decision to stop, about how close he had come to driving past. It had been a small choice. But it had changed everything. Before we reach the end, take a moment to comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced a moment where a simple act of kindness changed your life? As Armin walked toward his car, he realized something profound. Life didn't always offer grand opportunities for change. Sometimes, it was the quiet, unnoticed moments, the ones that seemed insignificant at the time, that held the power to reshape everything. And sometimes, the person you help on the side of the road turns out to be the one who helps you find your way back to yourself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Because kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back.